The soft hum of reporters whispering into their microphones, the flicker of camera flashes in a subdued royal gathering, and Prince Harry, clad in his signature polished blazer and open-collar shirt, stood on stage during what was meant to be a heartfelt tribute to families, fatherhood, and resilience. The Sussexes had just wrapped up a major speaking engagement tied to their Archwell Foundation, beaming about values, family, and legacy. But just as the applause began to die down, Harry uttered a single sentence. A sentence that most of the audience missed in the moment. A sentence that would later become the fuel for one of the most bizarre and unsettling mysteries surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. I remember that day in South Africa with Archie. Or maybe it was before he came into our lives. I always forget. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. That tiny slip, muttered casually and followed by a chuckle, triggered a sequence of rewinds, breakdowns, and analyses the world over. Because here was a father, at least, publicly recognized as such, admitting on record that he couldn't quite recall when his son entered his life. Not just forgetting a date, but questioning whether a monumental memory, one captured in their own Netflix series, was real at all. Within hours, social media went into overdrive. Hashtags like hashtag Where is Archie, hashtag Borrowed Kids, and hashtag Sussex Surrogacy spiraled across platforms. Investigative journalists dusted off old clips. Body language experts weighed in on television panels. Former palace insiders whispered cryptic confirmations. Even previously discarded theories began to resurface with renewed legitimacy. Suddenly, the idea that Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor might not exist in the way the public had been led to believe didn't sound so far-fetched anymore. But how did we get here? To understand the gravity of this slip, this unintentional confession, one must rewind to the beginning. Back to the unprecedented royal love story, one marked by fairy tales, rebellion, and distance. When Meghan Markle joined the royal family, she brought a fresh breath of modernity, empathy, and visibility. But she also brought disruption. From the way she cradled her baby bump to the secrecy surrounding Archie's birth location and godparents. Everything about the Sussexes' journey into parenthood carried an air of mystery, almost theatrical in its veil of privacy. Unlike William and Catherine, whose children were introduced to the world within hours of birth outside the Lindo wing in London, Meghan and Harry chose seclusion. There was no iconic hospital step photo, no confirmation from medical staff, no clear date of birth from the traditional sources that often accompany such royal events. Instead, a vague announcement was issued hours after the supposed birth. The first photo? A tightly staged palace corridor moment, far from candid, and many would say far from convincing. Over time, the public began noticing something else. Archie wasn't seen much at all. Months would pass without a single verified image. And when photos did surface, inconsistencies abounded. Different hair textures, eye shapes, skin tones. A child who looked drastically older in one frame, then eerily younger in another. Onlookers brushed it off as natural changes or respectful privacy. But behind closed doors, many started whispering a darker possibility. Was the child being swapped? Or was there more than one? As pressure mounted on Meghan and Harry to reveal more about their family, especially after they left royal duties behind and struck deals with Netflix and Spotify, the strategy shifted. They began carefully curating glimpses. Tiny feet on Instagram. A blurred silhouette in a birthday video. A photo from behind at a chicken coop. Each image designed to show just enough to silence critics, but never enough to confirm identity. All the while, the mythos around Archie deepened. Yet the tipping point didn't come from skeptics, tabloids, or palace intrigue. It came from Prince Harry himself. A man who once fiercely guarded his son's privacy now found himself contradicting his own timeline. And in that moment of hesitation, that stuttered memory about when his son came into their lives, he opened the door to a flood of scrutiny that neither he nor Meghan could control. It wasn't just about a forgotten date anymore. It was about trust. If this was a genuine lapse, it meant the very fatherhood he so passionately espoused might be manufactured. If it wasn't a mistake, if it was a deeper Freudian slip, then it meant something else entirely. That the child, or children, the Sussexes presented to the world weren't what they claimed. that perhaps they had gone so far down the path of privacy, performance, and image control, they had erased the line between reality and illusion. Now, imagine this. What if Archie Harrison was never born to Meghan at all? What if, as some insiders suggest, a surrogate carried the child, and legal complexities around naming, documentation, and nationality led the couple to delay announcements and shield facts? Or even more provocatively, what if multiple children were photographed as Archie over time to create a consistent image while obscuring the actual arrangement? Some would call it wild speculation. Others would call it damage control. But when Lady Colin Campbell, a figure often dismissed as eccentric, suddenly re-emerged in the public sphere claiming she had seen documentation that hinted at adoption procedures, people started listening. And when independent analysts began aligning inconsistencies in public records with timeline gaps in Meghan's pregnancy journey, the theory began to congeal into something more concrete. Still, all of this would have remained dormant, an uncomfortable footnote in royal gossip, if not for Harry's blunder. His sentence became a lit match in a room full of gas fumes. And the public? They were no longer content with curated documentaries and black-and-white portraits. They wanted truth. Raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable truth. And that demand for truth wasn't confined to Archie. It spilled over into questions about Lilibet, the second child. The mystery only deepened as the couple released a single, stylized image for her birthday and then disappeared her entirely from public view. No candid photos. No casual outings. Just silence, broken only by carefully scripted PR moments. As this video unfolds, you'll journey deep into the cracks of the Sussex story. From the eerie inconsistencies around Archie's appearances to the insider accounts suggesting stand-in children and surrogate silence. You'll learn about the Netflix contracts that may have forced Meghan and Harry's hand, the former palace staffers who left under sudden circumstances, and the subtle signals that something, somewhere, went wrong. But most of all, you'll hear the story that Prince Harry didn't mean to tell. The one he whispered through a half-forgotten anecdote. The one that, intentionally or not, might have exposed the greatest royal illusion in recent memory. Because in this story, it's not just about whether Archie exists. It's about how far people are willing to go to protect a narrative. And once that narrative breaks, even just for a second, the consequences are seismic. What will you believe? Are you ready to question everything? It began with something so small, so seemingly insignificant, that most people missed it the first time. A casual phrase, spoken by Prince Harry at a routine event meant to uplift and inspire. He was standing on a modest stage, discussing his journey through fatherhood. It was one of many public appearances where the Duke of Sussex reflected on the values of compassion, resilience, and family. The audience listened politely, nodding, clapping at the appropriate cues. It was nothing out of the ordinary. Until it was. I remember that trip to South Africa. Archie wasn't with us then. Or was he? No, he came later. I think. There it was. A momentary stumble. A slip. But for a man as media-trained, as carefully rehearsed, as globally scrutinized as Prince Harry, even a hesitation becomes a headline. And this one sent shockwaves. Journalists immediately latched onto the inconsistency. Within hours, side-by-side comparisons were flooding the internet. In one clip from the couple's Netflix documentary, Meghan is seen talking about bringing Archie to South Africa during their 2019 royal tour. In another, Harry himself speaks fondly of introducing his son to Archbishop Desmond Tutu. That moment had been celebrated across the globe, portrayed as a shining light of cultural exchange and family unity. It was one of the few public moments Archie was seen clearly on camera. So what did Harry mean, then, when he said Archie wasn't there? Was it a lapse in memory, or something deeper? How could he forget his own son's presence during such a well-documented trip? At first, defenders chalked it up to stress. Parenthood, after all, is overwhelming. And Harry had been living in a whirlwind of media backlash, family tension, and life transitions. But as more footage surfaced and was dissected, the lapse began to appear less like a mistake and more like an unraveling thread in a much larger tapestry. Social media platforms exploded. Analysts, royal watchers, body language experts, and amateur sleuths all began asking the same question. Where is Archie? And, perhaps more disturbingly, has he ever truly been here? People began revisiting every photograph, every clip, every mention of the child since his birth. They scrutinized the date stamps, the lighting, the facial features. Some images appeared to show a baby with dark curly hair, while others revealed straight, light strands. In one Christmas card, the child looked unusually mature for his age. In another, he appeared too small, too doll-like, almost waxy in expression. Was it lighting? Angle? Or was there something more artificial going on? Then came the revelation that few were ready for: metadata. One tech-savvy Twitter user, who claimed to be a former digital analyst, downloaded a high-resolution version of a publicly released family portrait from the Archwell Foundation's website. Upon inspecting the metadata of the image, essentially the invisible footprint that shows when and how a digital photo was taken, they discovered that the timestamp on the image didn't match the event's date. The supposed Christmas photo had been taken in October. The birthday photo was allegedly taken 2 months before the actual birthday. This revelation blew the doors wide open. Suddenly, every photograph became suspect. If they were using pre-shot or staged images, why? What were they trying to hide? Some argued it was purely for privacy. After all, Meghan and Harry had made it clear they were done living life under the microscope of the British tabloid press. They didn't owe anyone access to their children. But critics fired back. Privacy is one thing. Constructing a controlled reality is another. The questions snowballed. Why wasn't Archie seen at any family weddings, funerals, or large royal gatherings, even ones that welcomed other children? Why did Meghan appear in public with different-sized bumps within the same week during her pregnancy? Why did palace aides refuse to confirm who was present during the birth? Why did no one, outside of a select group bound by secrecy, ever witness the child in a normal, candid environment? The media storm grew chaotic. Former palace aides were hounded by journalists. Sources close to the royal family refused to go on record but dropped cryptic hints. One insider told a major tabloid, "It's not my place to say, but there's a reason you've never seen him the way you've seen other royal children." Another commented, "We were told to never ask questions. You don't ask about Archie." Even royal biographer Angela Levin, known for her access and insight into the family, commented during an interview that she found the entire situation strangely veiled in secrecy. While she stopped short of endorsing any specific theory, her hesitation said more than her words. The tipping point came when a well-respected broadcaster accidentally aired a segment that was meant for internal review. In the clip, 2 anchors, off-air and unaware the camera was rolling, discussed the Archie situation candidly. One anchor remarked, "There's no way they'd go this far with the deception, unless they never had him to begin with." The footage was quickly pulled, but the damage had been done. Viewers had seen it. They had heard it. And they believed it. The public began demanding answers. Online petitions were launched, demanding transparency from the Sussexes. Hashtags trended daily. Theories spiraled. Perhaps Archie was real but had been hidden due to a medical condition. Perhaps a surrogate gave birth and the royal institution covered it up to avoid constitutional chaos. Perhaps Archie was real, but not being raised by Meghan and Harry at all. The questions became more invasive and relentless. Was Meghan ever truly pregnant? Were multiple children used for photo shoots? Was there a custody arrangement that no one knew about? And still, silence from the Sussex camp. They issued no statement, no rebuttal, just silence. Some claimed this was further evidence of guilt. Others believed it was dignity, refusing to engage in absurdity. But the longer they remained silent, the louder the voices grew. Behind the scenes, things were no quieter. According to leaks from Montecito neighbors, the couple's property was frequently visited by unmarked cars and unfamiliar nannies. One local claimed she saw a different child entering the estate each week. Another resident, a retired private investigator, said he was approached to look into the legitimacy of the children's public presence, though he declined. The world had entered a strange and surreal phase of obsession. On one hand, people were disgusted with the invasion of privacy. On the other, they were captivated by the possibility that a royal child, a figure next in line to the throne, might be nothing more than a shadow, a name with no body, a borrowed face for a borrowed legacy. And at the center of it all was that one sentence. That hesitation. That moment when Prince Harry, tired, emotionally spent, caught off guard, slipped. It was so quick, so easily forgettable. But in a world starved for transparency, that moment became a catalyst for an entirely new chapter of royal drama. It wasn't just about the child. It was about credibility, about trust, about the balance between privacy and performance. Had the Sussexes constructed an elaborate mirage, and if so, why? For protection? For optics? For control? As more evidence came to light, including missing birth records, unverifiable timelines, and statements from whistleblowers, the conspiracy no longer looked like fringe madness. It began to resemble something terrifyingly real. And it all started with a single, simple question, one that echoed through the walls of Windsor, through the sands of Montecito, and across digital realms worldwide. Where's Archie? Where has he really been? And most disturbingly, was he ever truly here? That's where the story begins. But the deeper you look, the more unsettling it becomes. Because the mystery of Archie Harrison is not a story about a child. It's a story about control, about manipulation, and about what happens when public image is treated like currency. And when that currency runs dry, the truth often finds its way through the cracks. The slip wasn't just Harry forgetting a moment. It was the moment everything changed. It was the first crack in a porcelain mask the world had been admiring for far too long. And now, piece by piece, that mask is falling. From the moment the birth of Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor was announced, things felt different, unusual, offbeat. There was an undercurrent of secrecy woven into the entire event, an atmosphere that had never surrounded the births of Prince George, Princess Charlotte, or even Prince Louis. Those royal arrivals had been moments of national celebration. Cameras camped outside the Lindo wing for days, the public eagerly awaiting a glimpse of the future heirs. But with Archie, that familiar royal rhythm was abandoned. And the deviation was so stark, it raised immediate eyebrows. The first sign came on May 6, 2019. A statement was issued from Buckingham Palace that Meghan Markle had gone into labor, but the timeline was already broken. Within minutes, another update claimed she had already delivered the baby hours earlier. The official palace bulletin said Meghan gave birth at 5:26 a.m., but this wasn't revealed until after 2 p.m. Following a prior statement that she had only just gone into labor, it was as though the birth announcement had been scrambled, rewritten mid-release. The public began to question, why the confusion? Why the secrecy? Then came the next peculiarity. Unlike her royal predecessors, Meghan did not appear outside the hospital to introduce her newborn. No proud photo on the hospital steps. No cheers from waiting crowds. No smiling doctors posing beside the parents. Instead, Meghan and Harry staged a tightly controlled photo shoot in St. George's Hall at Windsor Castle 2 days later, introducing Archie to the world under gilded ceilings and thick tension. They were surrounded not by hospital staff or well-wishers, but by polished marble, royal aides, and staged lighting. More notable still was the fact that no one, including senior royal correspondents, was permitted to witness the handoff of the baby, nor was the location of Meghan's delivery ever officially confirmed. Only much later did reports emerge indicating she gave birth at the private Portland Hospital in London, far from Windsor, but by then, speculation had already taken root. The photos themselves were odd. Archie was swaddled so tightly that not even his hands or face were fully visible. Meghan and Harry beamed for the cameras, but the expressions were strained, cautious. Meghan's post-pregnancy figure was curiously sleek for someone who had just delivered a baby days prior. Journalists and viewers alike couldn't help but notice the precision. Every frame looked overly curated. Nothing felt candid or spontaneous. As weeks passed, Archie all but vanished from the public eye. Unlike the frequent photo updates the world received from William and Catherine, playful shots of their kids in gardens, first day of school portraits, candid family moments, Meghan and Harry released virtually nothing. The next time the world saw Archie's face clearly was months later, in a black-and-white holiday photo that raised even more eyebrows. In this image, Harry is crouching, Meghan stands smiling, and baby Archie crawls toward the camera in the foreground. Except something about Archie didn't look quite right. The child appeared superimposed. Several photo editors online accused the couple of photoshopping the baby's image into the scene. Lighting inconsistencies were evident. The shadows didn't align. Digital markers hinted at image manipulation. The image was beautiful, but it was strange, too perfect, too controlled, and not convincing to the skeptical eye. Then came the birthdays. Archie's first and second birthdays were marked not by parties or live footage, but by single pre-recorded videos or still photos, often leaked to press with vague dates. In one case, a video featured Meghan reading a children's book to Archie. Yet even this, meant to portray casual maternal warmth, sparked suspicion. Viewers noted Archie's voice was never heard. His reactions felt disjointed, his eye contact evasive. Some speculated the child didn't appear attached to the woman reading. Was it simply toddler unpredictability? Or something deeper? And each time such questions arose, the Sussexes clamped down harder. Legal threats were issued to outlets who speculated. Photographers near their Montecito estate were sued. One neighbor claimed even drones capturing footage were met with private security responses and cease and desist orders. The message was clear: questions would not be tolerated. Curiosity was met with aggression. Yet the mystery only deepened. In contrast to other royal children, Archie never accompanied his parents on major public events. No Easter services, no Jubilee celebrations, no coronations, and no charity visits. He was never photographed attending nursery school drop-offs or family holidays. Even private moments, like beach strolls or trips to the zoo, were suspiciously void of candid images. When the couple moved to the United States in early 2020, the invisibility cloak thickened. The Sussexes were rarely seen in public with a child. Occasional paparazzi shots emerged showing Meghan with a baby in a sling or stroller, but these were often grainy, distant, and left more questions than answers. Was that really Archie? Or another child entirely? Speculation turned into obsession when observers began comparing photos. In some images, the child appeared tall and lanky. In others, short and stocky. Skin tones varied. Hair textures shifted. While children do change rapidly in their early years, these discrepancies were startling. People began asking the unthinkable: were different children being photographed under the same name? This theory gained traction when a former staff member, speaking under anonymity, claimed that Archie was rarely seen even inside the Sussex residence. "We were always told he was napping or with someone else," the source revealed. It was odd. You'd expect new parents to be doting, especially Meghan, who spoke so passionately about motherhood. But the baby was like a ghost, present, but never really there. Around the same time, another whistleblower, allegedly from a private agency that works with high-profile families, claimed to have received inquiries from a Sussex associate about child actors or body doubles for use in staged media content. The implication was chilling. Were Meghan and Harry so fiercely private they had resorted to borrowing children for photographs? That allegation, had it remained uncorroborated, would have faded. But a photograph surfaced shortly afterward. An accidental shot taken by a tourist in Santa Barbara, showing what appeared to be Meghan walking with a young child. In the background, a woman matching Meghan's features pushes a stroller, but the child beside her is clearly of a different race. The child, maybe 4 years old, had long braids and darker skin. Was it Archie? If so, why did he look so different from previous photos? If not, why was Meghan presenting this child in a seemingly familial context? The Sussexes never addressed the image. Instead, they continued issuing stylized content: a sketch-like family portrait on their Christmas card, a blurred video of children's legs splashing in a fountain, a still image of tiny hands holding a flower. Always just enough to satisfy curiosity, never enough to confirm identity. When Lilibet was born in 2021, the same pattern repeated. Her birth was even more veiled than Archie's. No hospital photos, no witnesses, no appearances. A single photo was released on her birthday. Once again, a pose scene where the baby was mostly obscured. Critics began calling the couple's children digital phantoms, images generated for public consumption but unverified by reality. As months became years, people began asking a more disturbing question. Not where is Archie, but was there ever an Archie at all? What began as curiosity had morphed into concern and then into doubt. Doubt that perhaps these weren't simply privacy choices, but pieces of a larger illusion. A narrative meticulously crafted and defended at all costs. One where appearances mattered more than truths. Where children became props, their real existence unprovable, their identities uncertain. And through it all, Prince Harry's face remained haunted. In interviews, his voice trembled when discussing fatherhood. His anecdotes were vague. His eyes darted. He clung to generalities, love, responsibility, protection, but failed to anchor his stories in detail. As though the more he said, the more he risked slipping again. Because the truth, perhaps, was always threatening to burst forth. The truth that the world was watching a family not grounded in reality, but wrapped in smoke and mirrors. And as the fog cleared, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Archie's presence had always been a mystery, not because of the press, but because the stories surrounding him never quite added up. Long before Prince Harry's accidental slip and the swirling rumors about borrowed children, there had already been whispers that started as little more than murmurings among royal watchers and investigative bloggers. Those whispers eventually grew louder, bolder, and more insistent. That Meghan Markle never actually carried Archie herself. That the child was born through a surrogate, and the secrecy surrounding the birth was not about privacy, but about protecting a lie. To truly understand the surrogacy narrative, one must return to the beginning. The early days of Meghan's public pregnancy in 2018. At the time, the announcement was received with joy across the Commonwealth. It was made during the couple's royal tour of Australia, a strategic choice to ensure international attention and warm media reception. Meghan was glowing, her hand often placed protectively over her stomach. Yet even then, something felt off. Not to the casual observer perhaps, but to those who had closely followed royal pregnancies before. Veteran royal correspondents began to notice inconsistencies almost immediately. Meghan's bump appeared to fluctuate in size dramatically within days. One moment it was pronounced and heavy. Days later, it appeared minimal or shifted in position. Some photos from public engagements showed the bump sitting unnaturally high, then the next day extremely low. Video footage circulated online of Meghan squatting effortlessly in heels. Something most late-term pregnant women, especially in their third trimester, would find nearly impossible. These weren't anomalies noticed by fringe conspiracy theorists. They were flagged by everyday viewers, mothers, and even medical professionals who commented on social media, confused by what they were seeing. It didn't take long before these observations transformed into allegations. Several bloggers suggested Meghan might be wearing a prosthetic pregnancy belly, a silicone bump designed to simulate pregnancy. This theory, they argued, explained the size inconsistencies and odd movement captured in video clips. In one viral moment, Meghan's stomach appeared to collapse slightly as she stood up from a seated position, leading critics to claim it was evidence of an artificial device shifting beneath her clothing. The palace's response? Silence. No corrections. No confirmations. No attempts to dispel the speculation. That silence spoke volumes. Because in royal history, the firm is known to act swiftly when rumors threaten the crown's image, issuing clarifying statements, leaking favorable stories, or arranging photo opportunities. But in this case, nothing came. And that nothing became something. The surrogacy theory gained significant traction when Lady Colin Campbell, a well-known author and biographer of the royal family, began making subtle comments on talk shows and interviews. Known for her controversial yet often accurate insights, Lady C hinted at a secret arrangement regarding the Sussex baby that, in her words, would shake the monarchy if ever confirmed. Though she never outright stated surrogacy, her innuendo was unmistakable. Her exact words on one televised segment were, "There is more to the story of that child's entrance into the world than we've been told. And someday, I believe, the truth will come out." It was a statement that lingered in the public consciousness, triggering renewed interest in the circumstances surrounding Archie's birth. People started questioning the absence of Meghan's delivery team. Why were no attending doctors named in the birth announcement? Why did Meghan and Harry refuse to reveal the identities of Archie's godparents, a break from centuries-old royal tradition? Why were even senior royals, according to rumors, denied access to the newborn for hours after his birth? Adding to the mystery, the couple announced Meghan had gone into labor hours after she had already given birth. A completely unnecessary manipulation, unless, of course, something needed to be hidden. Theories circulated that Meghan and Harry used a surrogate in the United States or through a private UK agency. and that the birth had occurred well before the official date. Some suggested that Meghan had been spotted flying to New York under the radar, where she could have coordinated a discreet surrogate birth and returned before anyone noticed. This theory was supported by the highly publicized but strangely timed baby shower Meghan attended in New York, hosted by close friends including Serena Williams and Amal Clooney. Why host a baby shower overseas, weeks before the supposed due date, away from the royal circle? Why keep the event so secretive? There was also the matter of the security detail. Multiple former royal protection officers reportedly stated that during Meghan's pregnancy, there were odd changes to her security routines. At times, they were told to reroute Meghan's travel path at the last minute. In other moments, they were denied access to her whereabouts altogether. "We didn't always know where she was," one former staffer reportedly said, and that was unusual. More explosive still were allegations that a small group of Meghan's inner circle had been sworn to legal silence. NDAs issued not just by the palace, but also by outside legal teams. One anonymous source claimed to have been approached to sign a non-disclosure agreement during a temporary post at Frogmore Cottage, where the Sussexes lived at the time. The NDA, they said, referenced the confidential medical arrangement pertaining to the household. The language was vague, but suggestive. When questioned about these stories, Meghan and Harry did not deny them. They simply avoided addressing them. In their infamous Oprah interview, when asked about the secrecy surrounding Archie's birth, Meghan pivoted to discussions about racism and tabloid mistreatment. The question of surrogacy was never raised directly, but its absence was felt. Why didn't Oprah ask? Why didn't the couple proactively clarify? Especially when the speculation had been so widely circulated for years. Some argue that the couple were merely guarding their child's privacy, but others point out that privacy and deception are not the same thing. If surrogacy had indeed been used, a legal, legitimate medical choice, why not just say so? Many public figures have done the same, but the refusal to address the matter only made the mystery more compelling. Legal experts joined the debate, raising questions about the implications of surrogacy on royal succession. In the UK, the legal mother is the woman who gives birth, regardless of genetics. So if Meghan had used a surrogate, but the process hadn't been legally formalized under British law, would Archie be eligible for titles or inclusion in the line of succession? The stakes were high, and the incentive for silence even higher. The narrative shifted further when Meghan announced her second pregnancy. This time, even more guarded, even more veiled. Few public appearances and a single stylized pregnancy photo. Shot in their garden, with Meghan lying on Harry's lap in a white dress, was released to mark the announcement. It was serene, romantic, but again, oddly staged. There was no footage of her walking pregnant. No video clips of movement or progression. Just images, still, poetic, and perfectly controlled. When Lilibet was born, there was no hospital photo, no doctor interviews, no confirmation from hospital staff. Just a media statement, followed by a delayed photo months later. And once again, the rumors returned. By now, the public had become acclimated to the idea that Meghan's pregnancies were unlike any others in the royal family. The absence of proof created its own reality. Surrogacy wasn't just a rumor. It had become the default assumption in many circles. Reddit threads dedicated to dissecting the timeline were flooded with contributions from mothers, nurses, and pregnancy experts, all analyzing Meghan's bump photos, movements, and wardrobe choices. They pointed out when zippers seemed misplaced, when the bump folded, when shadows didn't align. But more than physical analysis, it was the behavioral cues that raised red flags. Meghan's handling of Archie in public clips felt distant. In one video, she struggles to secure Archie in a baby carrier, an awkward, unfamiliar motion that mothers online quickly called out. In another, she corrects Harry for misremembering details about their son, even though Harry's version matched earlier interviews. Why the contradiction? Why the need to steer the narrative? And then, of course, there was Harry's own mistake, his forgotten timeline. The moment that reopened every wound, every rumor, every suspicion. Because if the surrogate theory were true, it would make sense that Harry's recollections might be blurred, inconsistent. If Archie didn't come into their lives through traditional birth, if there were months of legal processing or adjustments before they could introduce him publicly, it would explain the fog, the secrecy, the stiffness in their stories. This chapter of the Sussex saga is not simply about how Archie was born. It's about why the truth, if different from the narrative presented, was hidden so fiercely. Was it fear of scandal? Worry about backlash? Or something deeper? An understanding that the legitimacy of their child could impact their titles, their contracts, their entire brand? Surrogacy is not shameful. It is a gift for many families. But when wrapped in layers of royal protocol, constitutional importance, and media spectacle, it becomes more than a medical choice. It becomes a narrative risk, a weapon, a potential undoing of an entire image constructed on authenticity and vulnerability. And if that image cracks, what's left? For years, Lady Colin Campbell had been viewed as something of an anomaly in royal commentary. Eccentric, outspoken, often controversial. Yet what many dismissed as theatricality was, in fact, her greatest strength. Behind the flamboyant persona was a woman with deep ties to the aristocracy, an encyclopedic knowledge of royal protocols, and an unflinching willingness to say what others wouldn't. She didn't whisper behind closed doors. She spoke her truth, unapologetically and often with deadly precision. And when it came to Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, Lady C had been raising red flags from the very beginning. In the months following Archie's birth, she hinted during multiple interviews that not all was as it seemed with the Sussexes. When questioned, she would smile cryptically and deflect, but never deny. Her words were measured but suggestive. At the time, her critics labeled her as jealous or bitter, an aging aristocrat desperate for attention. But Lady C wasn't speaking for shock value. She was dropping breadcrumbs. Those breadcrumbs turned into an avalanche when whispers began to circulate in early 2022 that Lady Colin Campbell had obtained, or had at least seen, legal documents related to the adoption of a child linked to the Sussexes. The rumor originated from an offhand remark she made during a podcast appearance, where she referred to a specific arrangement involving third-party custody protocols. The comment seemed vague at first, until an independent blogger unearthed footage from a previous Q&A video, in which Lady C claimed that a well-known royal couple had engaged in legal measures in another jurisdiction concerning a child not biologically theirs. The implications were explosive. Speculation ran wild that Lady C was referring to Archie and that she had seen proof, documents verifying that the child had been adopted or otherwise transferred through legal guardianship, not born to Meghan and Harry in the traditional sense. The question wasn't just about whether Lady C had seen adoption papers. It was about why she would sit on such a revelation for years, and what had prompted her to begin speaking more directly now. According to insiders close to the royal biographer, the document in question wasn't directly in Lady C's possession, but had been shown to her by a mutual acquaintance with access to a legal firm operating in California. The file allegedly pertained to a private court filing registered under sealed identity codes, routine practice in adoption or surrogacy cases involving high-profile clients. However, what set this file apart was the inclusion of a pseudonym for a high-profile royal surname, matching a time frame that directly aligned with Archie's birth. Even more compelling, the listed birth mother was not Meghan Markle. There was no concrete evidence, no screenshot, no copy, no public filing. But Lady C's demeanor changed from coy to commanding. Her interviews began to carry a sharper edge. In one, she calmly declared, "The deception goes deeper than people know, and I am not the only one who knows it." She hinted that she had kept her silence to allow the Sussexes time to handle matters discreetly. But with the growing public scrutiny, and Harry's now infamous slip of the tongue, she no longer felt bound by discretion. Suddenly, other sources began to echo her claims. A retired legal secretary from California, speaking anonymously, claimed she once processed paperwork involving a couple from out of state requesting emergency guardianship. Though she never confirmed identities, she said, it was a high-profile situation. Everything was hush-hush. Even the judge's notes were sealed. Her timeline? Early May 2019. A separate source within a child welfare agency in the UK stated they had once flagged a transatlantic birth registration as incomplete due to discrepancies in the parent's documentation. That child's name, the source claimed, was later confirmed to be legally adjusted within weeks, another indicator, perhaps, of a post-birth guardianship transfer. If Lady C's indirect confirmations weren't enough, Her sudden withdrawal from major press events added fuel to the fire. She canceled a public speaking engagement in London, citing pressure from above. Rumors swirled that the royal family had privately asked her to stop speaking out. Whether that pressure came from Buckingham Palace or the Sussex's legal team remained unknown, but it was clear she had struck a nerve. What made Lady C's quiet bombshell so devastating wasn't just the possible confirmation of an adoption. It was the legal and constitutional ramifications of it. If Archie was adopted or born through a surrogate not properly registered under UK law, questions would arise regarding his position in the line of succession. British law, especially regarding royal titles and birthrights, is extremely specific. Only a natural-born child of a royal couple, born to the legal wife and recognized by the sovereign, can inherit royal titles and positions. The palace had remained silent on all of it. For Lady C, this silence was its own kind of confession. She argued, subtly but powerfully, that if the allegations were entirely baseless, why hadn't the monarchy moved to discredit her? Why had no legal action been taken against her when she implied that the foundation of Meghan and Harry's parenthood was, at best, manufactured and, at worst, fraudulent? She even challenged the Sussexes to sue her. "If what I'm saying is untrue," she said in a live interview, "they're welcome to take me to court. But we both know they won't, because I've said nothing they can legally disprove." This challenge landed like thunder across the media landscape. If Meghan and Harry remained silent, Lady C's credibility would grow. If they responded, they risked opening doors to discovery, evidence, and court-mandated truth. The public reaction was divisive. Some branded Lady C a troublemaker, a provocateur trading in unproven gossip. But others began to view her as a whistleblower, a woman with nothing to gain and everything to lose, choosing to speak out because the story had become too large, too impactful, to ignore. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of her statements was her assertion that even members of the royal family are aware. According to her, there had been quiet acceptance within royal circles that the child's birth had not followed traditional routes. Not everyone was told at first, she said. But once the facts emerged, the focus shifted from denial to containment. Containment, a word that implies more than just silence. It implies orchestration, a decision not to correct the narrative, but to maintain it, no matter what. Lady C never claimed to possess the original document. She never named the judge, the court, or the biological parents. But she didn't need to. Her calculated, confident manner said enough. She knew what she knew, and dared anyone to challenge her. The fallout was immediate. Talk shows buzzed with debate. Experts weighed in on the legal complexities of royal adoptions. Some called for Parliament to investigate. Others dismissed the entire discussion as cruel and intrusive. But everyone agreed on one thing. If even a shred of what Lady C suggested was true, it would fundamentally change the narrative that Meghan and Harry had crafted so carefully. They had presented themselves as a family unfairly persecuted, as parents protecting their children from the wrath of a cruel press and a racist institution. But if Archie had been adopted or born via a surrogate without disclosure, it would raise hard questions. Not about parenthood. Love, after all, is not tied to biology, but about integrity, about narrative manipulation, about the use of a child, real or not, as a shield, a brand, a bargaining chip. And all of this, every fragment of doubt, every whisper of deceit, stemmed from a single revelation by a woman the royals had long underestimated. Lady C, through nothing more than quiet assertion and unnerving confidence, had cracked the illusion. She had introduced the possibility that Archie Harrison, the child introduced to the world with pomp and pride, was not the child we were told he was. If the suspicions surrounding Archie's birth stirred quiet doubts, it was the imagery, the photographs, the holiday cards, the occasional video releases that turned those doubts into full-blown confusion. For a family so hell-bent on privacy, the Sussexes maintained a very peculiar relationship with the public eye. They didn't disappear, they staged. They didn't reveal, they curated. And each of those curated glimpses into their family life raised a deeper, more disturbing question. Who exactly were we looking at? The first official photo of Archie, taken inside Windsor Castle shortly after his birth, set the tone for what was to come. The image was stiff, formal, and carefully cropped. Baby Archie was barely visible, wrapped in a white blanket, his face half obscured. He was held by Prince Harry, flanked by Meghan and surrounded by Doria Ragland, Prince Philip, and Queen Elizabeth. At first glance, it was a historic family moment. But on closer inspection, the composition felt unnatural. Meghan's gaze didn't fall on the baby. Doria looked distant. The child's blanket covered every inch of his body except a sliver of skin. Some viewers even questioned whether a real baby was present in the shot. Skeptics pointed to the awkward hand placement, the stiff expressions, and the peculiar angle as red flags. Was the baby real? Or was this a placeholder image meant to buy time and silent speculation? These whispers only intensified with subsequent photos. A few months later, Meghan and Harry released a Christmas card via their charitable foundation. It featured a black-and-white snapshot of Archie crawling toward the camera, Harry grinning behind him, Meghan sitting in the background. At first glance, the image appeared charming. But tech-savvy users quickly flagged anomalies. The lighting on Archie didn't match the rest of the scene. His figure was unusually sharp compared to the slightly blurred background. Several photographers claimed the image looked digitally inserted, with one even conducting a rudimentary analysis showing discrepancies in light direction and shadows. That Christmas card set off an avalanche. From that point on, each visual release featuring the Sussex children was picked apart like a crime scene. Observers started compiling side-by-side images of Archie from different events. In one, his hair was fine and light brown. In another, it was coarse and darker. His facial features appeared to shift. One child had almond-shaped eyes, another had round ones. At first, these changes could be written off as the natural evolution of a growing child. But eventually, the differences became too significant to ignore. An anonymous Reddit thread that gained traction in early 2021 compiled over 20 public images of Archie. The author, a self-proclaimed facial recognition expert, used basic AI to analyze the symmetry and bone structure of the child in each image. The result? The algorithm flagged at least 3 distinctly different children. This wasn't conspiracy theory dressed up as science. It was technical, pattern-based facial mapping. While the report couldn't identify who the children were, it strongly suggested they weren't the same individual. One particularly glaring inconsistency came during a charity video posted on the couple's Archwell website. Meghan was shown reading a book to Archie, who sat on her lap in what appeared to be a candid home setting. But once again, the video raised more questions than it answered. Viewers commented on how disconnected the child appeared, avoiding eye contact, showing no signs of warmth or recognition. Several mothers pointed out how the child squirmed in a way that suggested unfamiliarity, not comfort. The room was staged, the lighting studio-grade, and the camera quality unnaturally high for a casual home video. Even more curiously, Harry was not present. By this point, a new theory began gaining steam, that the children shown in these media appearances were hired, not in the nefarious sense of full-time actors, but rather occasional stand-ins. Children chosen for their rough resemblance to a composite idea of what Archie or Lilibet should look like. If true, this would explain the inconsistencies in appearance, size, behavior, and even ethnicity. Where would such children come from? Enter the talent agency theory. It didn't take long before royal observers began combing through records of child casting calls in Los Angeles, especially during the time the Sussexes settled in Montecito. Several agencies in the area offer services not only for film and TV, but for private appearances and closed media projects, according to their own websites. One agency, whose name was redacted in leaked online discussions, reportedly received an inquiry about child models between the ages of 1 and 3 with biracial features in mid-2020. While the identity of the client was never revealed, the description aligned uncomfortably close with what was being speculated. Then came the moment that shook everything. In a blurry photo taken by a paparazzo through a long lens, Meghan was seen at a farmer's market with a child believed to be Archie. But the child in this photo looked older than expected and bore no resemblance to any previous photos. The internet erupted. Was this Archie grown up, or another child entirely? The debate raged for weeks. Meghan's team issued no comment. The paparazzo eventually pulled the image, but not before it was downloaded and dissected 1,000 times over. Each photo release after that seemed more abstract. On Lilibet's birthday, the couple released a stylized, high-resolution image showing her in a blue dress and bow, sitting on the grass. The image was pristine, professionally lit, and featured perfect posture and spacing. But again, many claimed the child looked unlike the Lilibet they had expected based on previous hints. Once again, facial recognition analysts suggested the child had no match with other known photos. The Sussexes never released candid videos of their children playing or interacting. No footage of first steps, no school drop-offs, no off-guard moments caught by bystanders. And yet, each official image bore the same hallmarks: hyper-controlled, minimal exposure of surroundings, and with facial features just vague enough to avoid identification. Was this all just an obsession of a curious public? Or was it a deliberate misdirection? One former palace photographer weighed in anonymously in a royal gossip forum. He explained that staged imagery is not inherently unusual for royal families. What's unusual, he said, is when the staging becomes the only view. Royals have always balanced privacy with visibility. What the Sussexes have done is eliminate authenticity altogether. They've replaced reality with branding. And branding matters. When Meghan and Harry signed their multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, part of the allure was family access. Their image, royal, American, multicultural, modern, was predicated not just on who they were, but who they were raising. The children were not just additions. They were key assets in the global brand. If Meghan and Harry were borrowing children to maintain that brand, the implications would be enormous. Not legally, perhaps, but morally. It would mean that children were being used as symbols, possibly without full consent or understanding. That public perception was being crafted not just through stories, but through faces that may not belong to the Sussex family at all. One investigative journalist went so far as to suggest that multiple photos featuring Archie were actually composite images, a technique used in advertising where several facial features are blended to create an idealized appearance. While there's no direct proof that this technique was used, the eerie uniformity of some images lends weight to the idea. Why go to such lengths? Privacy, yes, but also control. By managing what the world sees, the Sussexes avoid scrutiny. They avoid the messy reality of parenting, the unpredictability of candid photos. They avoid showing too much, and, in the process, possibly reveal too little. The final blow came when a Spanish journalist claimed to have received a leaked photo of Archie that looked nothing like the version shown to the world. She described the child as heavier, darker-skinned, and older-looking than the images released by the Sussexes. The photo was never published due to legal threats. But the journalist stood by her story, claiming the suppression was proof that something was being hidden. And maybe, just maybe, the children were part of that hidden truth. As the staged appearances piled up, the mystery of Archie and Lilibet grew deeper. Each smiling photo, each blurred video clip, each distant silhouette raised the same uncomfortable question. Who are we really looking at? Because if these children are not who we're told they are, then the deception is no longer just personal. It's public. It's deliberate. And it's been going on for years. To understand how something as unthinkable as borrowing children could even be suggested about two of the most famous public figures in the world, one must leave the palatial gates of Windsor and step into a different kind of empire. One where reality is shaped by lighting, contracts, and perfect camera angles. A world that Meghan Markle knew well long before she met Prince Harry, Hollywood. Before becoming a royal, Meghan had carved out a steady career as an actress. Her most notable role in the series Suits gave her moderate fame and access to a network of celebrities, stylists, and entertainment professionals. While she was never an A-lister, she had enough visibility to understand how branding, image management, and curated storytelling worked. In Hollywood, perception is currency. And in Meghan's case, that lesson would prove invaluable once she stepped into the royal spotlight. But what happens when royal branding intersects with Hollywood fabrication? In entertainment, especially film and television, the use of stand-in children is common. Child actors often have strict labor laws regulating how long they can work. For commercials or scripted scenes, it's not unusual for multiple babies to be hired to play one child. Some productions use twins or triplets for the same role, like in Full House, where Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen alternated playing Michelle Tanner. In the modeling world, children are cast to portray family members they have no biological connection to. The line between real and representational becomes blurred, and no one bats an eye. Now, apply this model to the Sussex brand. Meghan and Harry, post-royal exit, began leaning heavily on their identities as parents. Their compassion, their philanthropy, their podcast narratives, all wrapped in the language of family, legacy, and the next generation. The presence of their children, however controlled, was central to their post-royal relevance. And that's when the entertainment industry rumor mill began churning. By mid-2020, murmurs circulated through certain talent agency circles in Los Angeles and New York that a high-profile couple, names undisclosed, had inquired about casting biracial infants for private photography projects. Several agency employees, speaking anonymously, described inquiries for non-union, non-credited toddlers who would be used for short private shoots or family lifestyle portfolio updates. These weren't Netflix productions or ad campaigns. They were private, quiet, and contractual. One agency representative even stated that the clients requested children whose parents wouldn't require public acknowledgement, but who would sign standard image release forms. This meant no credits, no visibility, and no claim over how the photos would be used. It was a perfect arrangement for anyone looking to stage familial moments without revealing the truth behind them. While there is no concrete evidence linking these requests directly to Meghan and Harry, the timing and the description aligned closely with the Sussexes' movements during the same period. Around this time, they were preparing their new website, launching Archwell, and curating content for press releases and holiday cards, many of which featured images of their children, albeit in limited, highly stylized forms. But the whispers didn't stop at agencies. Around this time, people began analyzing a specific photo, one that appeared on the Sussexes' holiday card in 2021. The child featured as Archie looked distinctly different from previous images. He had a slightly broader nose, darker skin tone, and curly hair, features that did not align with earlier depictions of Archie, who had been shown with straighter, lighter hair and a slimmer face. Some observers chalked this up to the child growing, as children do, but others pointed out the sharp shift in features was too drastic to be ignored. Was this simply another child? And if so, who was he? Multiple internet sleuths began tracing clothing items, settings, and props used in Sussex media releases. One dogged investigator claimed that a toy seen in a Sussex family photo also appeared in a stock image library belonging to a Santa Barbara-based staging company. Another pointed out that the red slide featured in the background of a candid birthday party image had also appeared in unrelated influencer shoots in the same neighborhood. Was the Sussex household being staged for photography sessions? Further intrigue arose when a neighbor of the couple allegedly overheard security guards speaking in hushed tones about a scheduled photo day. According to this neighbor, the guards used language like kids arriving at 10 and contracts signed in the back gate, terminology more suited to a film set than a family gathering. More chilling still were claims that the Sussex home had, at times, been visited by a woman connected to a Los Angeles-based child talent agency. Though this has never been confirmed, one tabloid ran a grainy image of a woman who looked strikingly similar to that agency's head of bookings entering the Montecito property during a week when Meghan and Harry had no public engagements. Of course, none of this confirms anything conclusively, but the pattern, carefully orchestrated photos, the inconsistent children, the Hollywood connections, and the staggering silence, suggests more than coincidence. It suggests coordination, planning, intent. And while Meghan and Harry continued to present themselves as victims of media intrusion, they were also selectively feeding that same media machine the imagery they wanted to project. Imagery that included children, whose identities were increasingly in question. The broader question isn't just whether the children were borrowed, it's why. Why go through such elaborate measures? Was it to protect actual children from the spotlight? Or was it to manufacture a family unit that didn't truly exist in the way the public was led to believe? If the children were stand-ins, or composites, or borrowed temporarily, it would mean the Sussexes had constructed a facade so convincing, so emotionally manipulative, it fooled millions into believing in a narrative that never existed. It would mean their speeches about fatherhood and motherhood were performances, their charity events about child advocacy steeped in irony. And yet, for all the speculation, there was never a single denial from the Sussex camp. Not one public statement refuting the claims. No video of Archie playing in the garden. No live interviews or family interactions that might confirm authenticity. Just silence. Silence, and beautifully staged images. As the speculation mounted, Meghan and Harry doubled down on their controlled appearances. They released fewer photos, granted fewer interviews, and retreated further into curated digital releases. Each time, the children looked different. Slightly older, slightly changed, slightly unfamiliar. And that growing discomfort in the public consciousness gave rise to one terrifying possibility, that the children weren't just unseen. They were possibly never there at all. When Meghan Markle and Prince Harry signed their historic multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify in 2020, the announcement sent shockwaves through both the entertainment and royal worlds. It was a clear signal. The Sussexes were not merely stepping away from royal life. They were stepping into the lucrative world of content creation, where their personal story was no longer just history, it was product. But what few realized at the time was how much pressure those deals would exert on their lives, and how those pressures may have driven decisions that blurred the lines between authenticity and invention. At the core of both deals was one undeniable asset: the Sussex family image. Meghan and Harry weren't just valuable because of who they were. They were valuable because of what they represented. A modern, inclusive, global-facing monarchy. A young royal couple breaking away from outdated traditions. A family in exile, charting a new path in the land of opportunity. And nothing solidified that narrative more than the existence of their children. Archie and Lilibet weren't just royal children. They were emblems, symbols of the new Sussex brand. Diverse, free, unburdened by the crown. The children brought relatability, warmth, and emotional resonance to the Sussexes' public image. In fact, Netflix reportedly made it clear that any documentaries or content based on Meghan and Harry's life must include personal elements, particularly the family dynamic, in order to draw in viewers and justify the massive payout. This was not surprising. In a streaming world dominated by personality-driven storytelling, audiences crave intimacy. They want to feel as though they've been let inside the home, inside the marriage, inside the nursery. For Netflix, the Sussexes were not just creators. They were characters. And the children, whether visible or hinted at, were part of the contract. Pressure began to mount. According to industry insiders, Netflix expected the Sussexes to produce multiple projects over several years, including docuseries, scripted features, and animated programs. Deadlines were proposed. Outlines were demanded. And soon, the demand for footage, authentic, emotional, family-driven content, grew intense. This pressure coincided with an increasing number of carefully timed photo releases. Every time questions swirled about Archie's whereabouts or Lilibet's absence, a new image would surface. A birthday photo here. A holiday card there. Always professional. Always clean. And always just vague enough to leave observers uncertain. But the Netflix docuseries Harry and Meghan, released in 2022, pushed things to a new level. The series was billed as a deeply personal window into the couple's lives, their love story, and their challenges with the royal family. It included exclusive photos, private video footage, and narration from the couple themselves. But viewers immediately noticed something peculiar. While the show referenced Archie and Lilibet extensively, their actual appearances were fleeting, distant, or heavily stylized. There were no long sequences of the children playing. No candid family moments. The children appeared in brief clips, backs turned, shadows moving through a doorway, tiny feet running through grass. Even in home videos, the camera would pan away before capturing a full face. At first glance, this seemed like a calculated move to protect the children's privacy. But for many, it began to feel like something else entirely. A Netflix source, speaking under condition of anonymity, described the experience of working on the docuseries as strangely limited. According to this insider, the production crew was restricted from filming in certain parts of the house and told not to interact directly with the children. Most footage of Archie and Lilibet was reportedly pre-recorded or provided by Meghan and Harry themselves. They controlled every frame, the source said. which isn't unusual for high-profile subjects. But this was next level. We didn't meet the kids. We didn't even see them. It was like working around a myth. This comment caused a ripple of concern throughout the production community. Were the children being protected or withheld? Were they real, or had the Sussexes constructed an illusion so carefully that even professionals couldn't penetrate it? The Spotify deal raised similar questions. Meghan's podcast, Archetypes, was pitched as a deeply personal exploration of the labels women face in society. While not focused on her children, the show's promotional material leaned heavily on her identity as a mother. Meghan often referenced "my son" or "my little girl" in scripted lines. But the stories lacked specificity. No names, no dates, no anecdotes beyond what had already been publicly stated. Listeners began to notice a pattern. The children existed as ideas, not individuals. Then came the most damning blow. In 2023, Spotify terminated its deal with Meghan and Harry after only one season of Archetypes. According to reporting by the Wall Street Journal, Spotify executives were disappointed with the couple's lack of output. There were expectations, deliverables that had not been met. The podcast performance was underwhelming. More importantly, the behind-the-scenes tension suggested that the Sussexes had not lived up to their end of the bargain. Industry whispers suggested that part of Spotify's dissatisfaction stemmed from the perceived lack of authenticity. The content felt safe, pre-recorded, overly controlled. The real Meghan, raw, unscripted, never seemed to show up. And when it came to discussions of family life, listeners were left with vague references, not vulnerable truths. All the while, Netflix maintained their partnership, but expectations remained high. Future content would need to be compelling, personal, and emotionally rich. The Sussexes were running out of firsts: first interview, first documentary, first book. What remained was their family life, and that brought them back to the children. Pressure to produce child-focused content continued to loom. Whether it was plans for a family cooking show, a children's animated series, or a new documentary featuring parenting themes, the Sussexes were expected to deliver stories that centered around their unique position as modern royal parents. But how could they do that without fully revealing their children? Some theorized that this was precisely why Meghan and Harry resorted to carefully managed visuals, possibly even employing stand-in children or using stylized images. In their eyes, it wasn't deception. It was a way to fulfill contractual obligations while maintaining control. But for others, it was crossing a line. If Netflix and Spotify expected content that leveraged the children's presence, and Meghan and Harry couldn't or wouldn't provide it honestly, then every image, every clip, every anecdote became suspect. Was the child in that video actually Archie? Was the laugh in the background genuine? Was the birthday photo real, or a staged session with a substitute? The illusion began to fracture when viewers returned to the documentary and noticed inconsistencies. In one scene, Archie is shown with curly, jet-black hair. In a later one, supposedly just weeks apart, his hair appears fine and reddish. Lighting can change tones, yes, but the face? The build? Observers claim they weren't seeing the same child. Even more suspicious was the fact that, despite the growing criticism and media speculation, the Sussexes never provided any footage or photography that definitively proved continuity. They could have easily recorded a casual home video, narrated by Harry or Meghan, showing the children playing, learning, growing. But they didn't. Instead, they returned to their signature formula: silhouettes, backs of heads, soft focus, brief audio clips. For content creators paid tens of millions for their authentic life, the absence of authenticity was deafening. Former Netflix producers commented privately that if the Sussexes failed to deliver a second documentary or follow-up content that felt fresh and real, the deal could be renegotiated or even dissolved. The initial grace period had passed. The novelty was fading. Without new material featuring the family dynamic, what else was left? The final blow came when a leaked internal document from an Archewell planning session, dated early 2023, listed creative family media assets as a strategic priority. One entry read, "Potential inclusion of child-friendly footage, holiday or garden-themed, timed for streaming content refresh." That phrasing, sterile and corporate, did not reference real children. It referenced assets, deliverables. To some, it was the smoking gun. Whether or not the children were borrowed, staged, or substituted, the language made one thing clear. The Sussex children were being treated as elements of a brand, not simply as family members. The Netflix and Spotify deals had transformed parenting from a private act of love into a commercial expectation. And under that pressure, it appears, the line between truth and narrative may have been blurred beyond recognition.